A quarter of them are Syrian refugees. Now, their integration into the rest of society is not easy at all. With the war in Syria, the situation getting worse and worse, with many communities taking or calling for radical action, including curfews for Syrians and evictions. Salim El Medeb and Lucy Fielder have this report.
In this refugee camp in the Bekaa Valley, they're preparing as best they can for the tough winter months. More than a third of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon live in this agricultural region. Syria lies just across these mountains. But even here, the spectre of war is never far away. Unofficial camps are multiplying in the valley, fed by a constant flow of refugees. But international aid is shrinking. Short of funds, the UN's refugee agency has recently reduced its handouts.
We had to move from a blanket assistance to all the refugees to a targeted assistance, targeting only the most vulnerable.
Aid agencies aren't the only ones struggling. This Lebanese man, who lives less than 100 meters from the camp, wants to see radical action.
We hope our Syrian brothers will be resettled in a protected zone in Syria. The camp bothers us a lot. There's a lot of noise. And there's no authority here, no municipality, so they're not supervised. Their toilets have no sewers, it's unhealthy and it brings diseases.
The whole of Lebanon faces the same challenge. Jazin, the main Christian town in southern Lebanon, shelters more than 1,500 refugees. Here, the mayor has taken drastic measures. This week, local police are to expel 30 refugee families that have moved into these shops, even though most pay rent. Residents of this building signed a petition calling for their removal. Abu Khalid lives here with his wife and their 8 children. For them, this shop is a haven of peace.
We all know what's going on in Syria.
Would you really want me to take my children back to Syria today? I made them leave the country. We fled from bombardment and destruction. Are you telling me to take them back now to Syria?
No, we don't want that. But the situation in Syria could last for a few more days, or for 1, 2, or 3 more years.
Jazin municipality has forbidden Syrians from gathering in public. People complain of growing petty crime.
The most important security issue we have in Jazin is theft. The main parties responsible are the Syrian workers who live here. We don't have a problem with families. Our sole goal is to improve their quality of life, to make them leave these shops, so then they will settle in houses. We don't want to kick them out from Jazin. Definitely not.
2 families have caved into the pressure and left the building. Amin and her children have found temporary shelter nearby with other refugees. But they're planning to return to Syria, as one of her daughters already has, if they find nothing long-term.
They came and threatened us, saying, "One day you'll have to get out of here." We were horrified. We've started to look elsewhere, but where can we go? We've searched a lot, but we haven't found anything.
Alay, a tourist resort near Beirut, was one of the first Lebanese towns to impose a curfew on Syrians. From 8 in the evening, local police patrol. Uday Takriti has lived here for several months. He sees the curfew as collective punishment, although he recognises the challenges Lebanon faces.
I recognise that there's a state here in Lebanon, and that it's a small country that cannot support this number of Syrian refugees. But it has to balance its economic interests with meeting humanitarian needs.
But as the Syrian conflict drags on, with no end in sight, that balance is getting harder and harder to find.
Well, Lucy joins us now on the line, in fact, from Beirut. Lucy, we saw in your report there how tensions are rising. How would you say that the Lebanese have greeted the Syrian refugees since the start of the crisis there?
Well, tensions are rising, as we've just seen. However, it has to be said that since the beginning of this crisis, the Lebanese response has been largely positive, given that this is a tiny country of just 4 million people, and they've received around 1 million refugees, equivalent, of course, to a quarter of the population. It's the largest refugee burden that's been placed on any country since this crisis began. People have, despite that, been opening their homes. We've been to towns along the border, Arsal, others in the Bekaa Valley, where tens of thousands thousands of refugees have been taken in by some of these small towns, and they're not towns that are particularly rich or where people can afford to do that. Some families have been hosting refugees now for about 2 years. Nonetheless, tensions are rising. There's also a burden on the state. They've been giving education and health services to many Syrians, and we're starting to see these growing resentments. This summer, there were signs put up across some towns, some villages in Lebanon saying foreign workers should stay away or should go home, and it was widely understood that what was meant by that was the Syrians. Now, human rights groups campaigned. Those signs have been taken down, but with the curfews, with the harassment, with the evictions, we are seeing these tensions starting to rise.
It is an incredible number of people, as you say there, Lucy, particularly when you look at it proportionally, of course. I mean, what sort of impact does that have on the Lebanese economy?
Well, the Lebanese state, as I say, has been providing schooling, been providing health services and other services as well. So they've been appealing for a long time now for more international aid to help them meet that burden. But on a society level, things have been much more drastic. As I say, people have been taking people into their homes, but other Syrians who can or who have international aid to do so have been renting properties. So rents have been rising exponentially. And as I said, that's in areas along the border that are largely poor in the first place. There's also been a huge influx, of course, of cheap labour. Now, most manual labourers in Lebanon were already Syrian. Now there's been an influx of perhaps as many as 100,000, 200,000 more people. That's been forcing wages down. Now, about 1 million Lebanese already live in poverty. So these are enormous strains indeed. And, of course, a very big factor in the increasing resentment and the prejudices that we've been seeing rise in some of these towns.
Lucy, thanks very much. Lucy Field, our correspondent, joining us there from Beirut. And that was today's focus here on France 24. Well, that is all from me for now. I'll be back, of course, in an hour with another Live from Paris. Shortly, though, Cyril Vanier is going to be here. He'll be talking to our correspondent, Mark Perelman, as Francois Hollande travels to South Africa. That's all coming up with Cyril after the break in France 24.